Welcome to our channel, where the stories of people from different eras and professions come to life. We are in magnificent Ephesus, right by the sea, where the great temple of Artemis reaches toward the heavens, and ships from all over the world fill the harbor. Subscribe, and after listening, be sure to share your impressions in the comments.
Imagine a growing American town in the Midwest during the 1830s. Narrow dirt streets where the smell of fresh bread from bakeries mixed with the smoke of blacksmith forges. The sound of children's laughter and the creak of wagon wheels on the dusty road. A world where every copper penny counted and tomorrow's bread was never guaranteed. In this world lived a little girl, the daughter of a simple baker. It sounds ordinary, doesn't it? But from this very ordinariness, a story was born that would change an entire town. What does a person need to rise from poverty to prosperity? Luck, patrons, secret knowledge? Or is it something simpler and at the same time more difficult? Try to feel the aroma of fresh bread, hear the voices of merchants in the market square, and sense the coolness of the stone walls of an old tavern. Within these walls unfolds the remarkable story of one life, a story of how small dreams turn into great achievements. The story of a woman who learned to turn difficulties into opportunities and every failure into a lesson for future victories. Picture a morning in a small Midwestern town before the church bells rang for morning service and the first rays of sun touched the wooden walls of the houses. In one of those buildings, where the smell of freshly baked bread mingled with the smoke from the hearth, small hands were already at work. Childish fingers, still unskilled but diligent, kneaded dough under the watchful eye of her mother. Her father's bakery stood on the busiest street in town. It sounds surprising, doesn't it? But it was here, amid the constant noise of merchants' wagons, that the character of the future tavern owner was formed. Every morning, she watched customers choose bread, how they haggled, and how their faces changed at the sight of particularly successful baked goods. These first lessons in trade sank deeper into her memory than any formal instruction. Her mother taught her the main rule: never reveal the true price of goods right away. Let the customer first feel their value. Imagine an 8-year-old girl who already understood the difference between an ordinary buyer and someone who could pay more for the best bread. She noticed how her father changed his behavior depending on who entered the shop: a simple craftsman, a prosperous merchant, or a local dignitary. Winter months were especially hard. Firewood cost a lot, and flour became more expensive every week. But how interesting it was to watch her father find ways out of the most difficult situations. Sometimes he negotiated with the miller for deferred payment. Other times he traded part of the bread for other goods. These tricks seemed like real magic to her then. The girl quickly understood that in their world, every copper penny mattered. She learned to count not only money, but also bulk products, baking time, and the amount of firewood in the hearth. Mathematics was not an abstract science, but a daily necessity. When the neighbor boy boasted that he could read Latin letters, she silently calculated how many loaves of bread could be bought with the money his parents spent on his education. One memorable autumn day, a traveling merchant entered the shop. His clothes were worn, but of good quality, and his eyes held that special weariness of someone who had seen much. He asked for bread on credit, promising to pay in a week. Her father hesitated, but something in the stranger's manner convinced him. 7 days later, the merchant returned not only with the promised money, but also with a small bag of special spices. The aroma of cinnamon and nutmeg filled the entire bakery. It was then that the girl first understood: sometimes trust can bring more benefit than caution. This thought stayed with her deeply and later helped her many times in making decisions. Her mother taught her not only household management, but also the art of understanding people. How to determine by gait, voice, and facial expression what a person could afford. How to notice when a buyer was ready to pay more and when it was better to lower the price to keep a regular customer. These skills were passed on not by words, but through constant examples. But life changed sharply when her father fell ill. At first, it seemed like a common cold, but the cough grew worse and his strength left him with each day. The doctor demanded payment the family didn't have. The herbalist offered treatment with herbs, but her services also cost money. The girl first faced the harsh truth. In their world, money could mean the difference between life and death. The last months of her father's life became a real ordeal. Her mother worked in the bakery from early morning until late at night. The daughter helped as best she could. They saved on everything: firewood, food, clothes. They now baked only the simplest bread without expensive additions. Regular customers showed sympathy, but mercy had its limits. When her father died, the girl understood that childhood was over. Now every decision in the family was made with survival in mind. The bakery had to be sold at a price significantly below its real value, but there was no choice. Try to feel what this loss meant for a 12-year-old girl. The house where her childhood passed, the place where she learned the basics of trade, the smells and sounds that had become part of her, all of it disappeared in just a few days. But along with the bitterness of loss came understanding. Life doesn't wait until you are ready for its blows. Her mother found work as a servant in the house of a prosperous craftsman. The daughter also got a position helping in the kitchen and cleaning rooms. The wages were modest, but included housing and food. For the first time, the girl saw how those who stood a step higher on the social ladder lived. This difference seemed huge, but even then she understood that it was possible to rise to that step if you knew how. 6 years flew by like one long day full of work and observations. By the age of 18, she was no longer the timid girl from the bakery. Life in service had hardened her character and sharpened her mind. When the owner announced that he could no longer keep 2 servants, the choice fell on her. Her mother stayed, and the daughter had to find a new place. The tavern, Silver Dollar, was located in the heart of the town, where the main trade routes crossed. The owner, Margaret, a woman in her 50s with perceptive eyes, was looking for an assistant who could not only cook and clean, but also understand the nuances of serving different kinds of customers. The first weeks in the tavern became a real revelation. A completely different life boiled here than in the quiet craftsman's house. From early morning until late at night, dozens of people passed through the door, each with their own needs and whims. Merchants discussed prices for wool and grain. Craftsmen complained about new taxes, and sometimes those whose conversations were held in half whispers appeared. Margaret turned out to be a strict but fair mentor. She didn't just teach how to cook stew or fry meat. She passed on an entire philosophy of running a business. How to determine how much ale a particular visitor could handle. When to delicately hint at payment and when to give credit. Which conversation topics were better not to support so as not to bring trouble. Especially interesting was learning the art of brewing beer. In the tavern basement stood large barrels, and the air was filled with the sour smell of fermentation. Margaret showed how to choose malt, in what sequence to add hops, how to determine readiness by color and aroma. But how surprising it was to learn that every master had their own secrets, passed only to the most trusted people. After half a year of work, a young carpenter named John began to visit the tavern regularly. He was an apprentice in a workshop that fulfilled orders for the town council. Tall, with strong hands and kind eyes, at first he simply had dinner after work. But gradually, his visits became more frequent. Conversations started with ordinary topics: weather, work, town news, but over time they acquired special warmth. John spoke about his craft with such passion that even an ordinary description of making a chair sounded like a captivating story. He dreamed of one day opening his own workshop, marrying a good girl, and building a solid house. These simple desires seemed so real and achievable, especially compared to the uncertainty of life in service.
In the spring of that year, an event occurred that changed everything. Margaret fell seriously ill with the same lung disease that had once taken her father. The doctor shook his head, and the healer spoke of the need for long treatment. The tavern needed to stay open, otherwise regular customers would scatter to competitors. All responsibility fell on the shoulders of the young servant. Imagine a girl who just half a year ago felt shy in front of every visitor, now having to single-handedly manage the entire establishment. Purchase products, brew beer, cook food, serve customers, and keep accounts. Fear of making a mistake mixed with the excitement of independence. John often stayed after closing, helping to repair a broken bench or tighten a loose door. One such evening, when the last visitor had left and candles burned with a dim light, Margaret called her to her bedside. The old woman looked very bad, but her eyes still shone with intelligence. She pulled out a small scroll from under her pillow, covered in fine handwriting, and handed it over with trembling hands. It was the recipe for a special ale that made the silver dollar popular among knowledgeable people. The secret lay in a special mixture of herbs added at a certain stage of brewing. Some of these plants could only be found in the surrounding forests. Others had to be bought from traveling merchants. Margaret explained every subtlety of the process, every nuance that affected the taste of the finished drink. But how did it happen that a dying woman entrusted her main secret to a simple servant? The answer was simple and at the same time profound. Margaret had no children. Relatives appeared only when they smelled an inheritance, but they were interested only in money, not in continuing the business. She saw how the young woman treated the tavern not as a temporary shelter, but as her home. Margaret died a week after passing on the recipe. The funeral was modest, just as she had wanted. Relatives quickly sold the tavern to a new owner, a meat trader who planned to turn it into an ordinary shop. The young woman received a small sum as payment for the last months of work and was left without a roof over her head. John proposed marriage precisely in these difficult days. His proposal was not a romantic impulse. It was a weighed decision of a man who saw in her a reliable life companion. He had some savings, connections in town, and prospects of gaining master status. She brought into this union knowledge of running a household, understanding of trade, and, most valuable, the secret recipe that, if used correctly, could become the foundation of future prosperity. The wedding was simple but joyful. The young couple rented a small room above John's uncle's workshop and began building their life together. The recipe for the special ale was safely hidden, but the knowledge of its preparation lived in the young woman's memory. She understood the secret was their ticket to independence, but it needed to be used at the right time and in the right place. Moving to a larger city turned out to be a real adventure for the young couple. John received an invitation from his uncle, who owned a thriving workshop and a small tavern in the trading district. Try to imagine the feelings of the 21-year-old woman who for the first time saw a real big city with its wide streets, brick buildings, and endless flow of people. Uncle Peter's tavern was located on the corner of two busy streets. The building was solid, two-story, with strong oak beams and wide windows. On the first floor was the hall for visitors, kitchen, and utility rooms. The second floor was occupied by the owner's family. The young couple was given a small room right under the roof, cramped but cozy. Uncle Peter, a man of about 60 with a grey beard and perceptive eyes, met his nephew and his wife with sincere joy. He immediately understood that the young woman was no simple country girl. Her manner of holding herself, knowledge of the subtleties of serving visitors, and ability to quickly assess a situation
all spoke of serious experience in such an establishment. The first months in the big city brought many discoveries. Trade here was conducted completely differently than in the small town. Merchants came from distant lands, bringing goods she had only heard about before. Spices from the east, fine fabrics from the north, wines from southern regions. All this passed through the hands of local traders. Uncle Peter's Tavern specialized in serving exactly this public. Local craftsmen stopped here, as well as visiting merchants, minor officials, and sometimes even representatives of the church. Each category of visitor required a special approach, its own menu, its own manner of service. The young woman eagerly absorbed this knowledge, understanding its value for the future.
Especially interesting were the evenings when local merchants gathered in the tavern to discuss business. She served wine and food, carefully listening to conversations about prices for goods, new trade routes, and political changes that could affect trade. This information was real treasure for those who knew how to use it. John quickly settled into his uncle's workshop and showed himself as a talented craftsman. His hands seemed made for working with wood. Every item turned out not just functional, but beautiful. Customers appreciated this, and soon the young carpenter began receiving individual orders from wealthy townspeople. By the end of the first year of married life, it became clear that the family was expecting an addition. The pregnancy went easily, but working in the tavern became increasingly difficult. Uncle Peter showed understanding and allowed the young woman to spend more time in the kitchen, where the work was less strenuous. A son was born on a cold February morning.
Strong, healthy boy with a loud voice and grasping little fingers. Sounds surprising, doesn't it? But already in the first days of the child's life, it was clear that he had inherited his mother's persistent character and his father's strength. Motherhood brought new joys, but also new worries. Working in the tavern with an infant in her arms was impossible, so she limited herself to helping in the kitchen and keeping accounts of products. John worked with redoubled energy, trying to provide the family with everything necessary. Uncle Peter helped as much as he could, but he himself was no longer young. During these months, the young mother spent a lot of time at home, observing city life from the window. She saw how the flow of people changed depending on the time of day, which goods were in demand, and how different categories of buyers behaved. These observations were stored in her memory, forming an understanding of urban trade. Especially attentively, she followed the work of neighboring establishments. Opposite was a bakery, a bit further a fabric merchant's shop, and at the end of the street another tavern. Studying their methods, she understood that each had its own tricks for attracting customers and retaining regular visitors. When the son turned 6 months old, the family began seriously planning their future. Uncle Peter did not hide that he would like to pass the business into reliable hands, but the tavern required significant investments for a full purchase. John calculated income from his orders. The young woman estimated possibilities for saving, but the amount seemed unattainable. It was then that she first seriously thought about using Margaret's secret recipe. In a big city, the special ale could find its admirers among wealthy clients.
But for this it was necessary not only the skill to brew the drink, but also the opportunity to produce it, promote it among the right public, and protect it from counterfeits. John at first treated the idea with skepticism. It seemed more reliable to him to rely on his carpenter's skill than on some secret recipe. But gradually, seeing his wife's enthusiasm and her deep understanding of the nuances of tavern business, he began to listen to her plans. By the end of the second year of life in the big city, the family had some savings. Not huge, but enough to think about their own business. Uncle Peter hinted that he was ready to discuss terms of transferring the tavern, and John received an offer to become a full partner in the carpentry workshop. But how did it happen that all these plans collapsed in an instant? Early one morning in the third spring of their married life, John went to the construction of a new house for a wealthy merchant.
The work was responsible, installing load-bearing beams on the second floor. One of the beams turned out to be defective and cracked under the load. John fell from a height of 2 stories onto the stone floor. Her husband's death became not just a personal tragedy, but a complete collapse of all plans. The young widow with a 1-year-old child in her arms was left practically without means of subsistence. Uncle Peter showed sympathy, but his ability to help was limited. John's relatives, who had previously treated her coolly, now turned away completely. The funeral took place on a gloomy, rainy Wednesday. A few friends of John came to see their comrade on his last journey, but their sympathy could not change the harsh reality. A 23-year-old widow with a small child now had to take care of survival herself. Uncle Peter allowed her to stay in the room under the roof for another month, but then she needed to find another solution. John's relatives appeared just a week after the funeral. The brothers, who had never shown much interest in him during his life, suddenly discovered hot concern for the inheritance. Carpenter's tools, unfinished orders, small savings, all this, in their opinion, should go to them as blood relatives. Try to imagine the young woman who had just buried her husband, holding a 1-year-old child in her arms and forced to defend the last crumbs of property from greedy relatives. They referred to customs, the right of blood, and the fact that a woman could not dispose of male property. But she remembered her father's lessons about trade and understood giving in now meant dooming herself and her son to poverty. The dispute lasted several days. The relatives brought a local lawyer who was supposed to draw up documents on the division of the inheritance. But how surprised they were when the young widow demonstrated unexpected knowledge of the laws. It turned out that many months spent in Uncle Peter's tavern had not been in vain. She had carefully listened to the conversations of merchants and craftsmen about legal subtleties. In the end, she managed to defend about half of the inheritance. The tools had to be given away. Indeed, a woman did not need them, but the money, a small supply of products, and John's personal belongings remained at her disposal. This would have been enough for several months of modest life, but she needed to think about the future. Meanwhile, a new concern appeared in her life. The second child began to make itself known even before all the legal disputes with her late husband's relatives ended. The pregnancy was a complete surprise. In the bustle of recent months, she had not immediately noticed the changes in her body. Now it was clear that by winter, the family would grow. Uncle Peter, upon learning of the pregnancy, showed unexpected generosity. The old man understood that kicking a pregnant woman with a child out onto the street would be cruel, even by the standards of those harsh times. He offered her kitchen work in the tavern for housing and food without monetary wages. The conditions were hard, but there was no other way out. Work in the kitchen turned out to be exhausting. She had to get up before dawn to have time to prepare breakfast for the guests. The whole day passed in continuous cooking. Stew, fried meat, bread, pies, and in the evening, when the last visitor left, cleaning and preparation for the next day began. The little son was constantly nearby, playing among sacks of flour and barrels of oil. He quickly got used to the noise of the kitchen, the smells of cooking food, and the constant bustle. Sometimes it seemed surprising how calmly the child endured all these difficulties, as if he understood that his mother was doing everything possible for their survival. The pregnancy was difficult. Constant work on her feet, lifting weights, lack of rest. All this affected her health. But stopping was impossible. Uncle Peter, although he allowed her to stay, made it clear that his patience was not unlimited. Any weakness could lead to expulsion. Winter months were especially hard. In the tavern kitchen, it was warm from the constantly burning hearth, but the room under the roof froze through. The little son often fell ill, and there was no money for medicine. They had to rely on folk remedies and hope that the child's naturally strong body would cope on its own. A daughter was born in early spring, when the first warm days had just begun to warm the frozen ground. The birth was difficult.
The months of intense work and poor nutrition took their toll. The same midwife who had delivered the first child shook her head and spoke of the need for long rest. But what rest could there be for a woman who worked for food and shelter? The girl turned out to be weaker than her brother, but just as persistent in the struggle for life. She grew slowly, often cried, and demanded constant attention. Combining care for 2 small children with kitchen work became increasingly difficult. Uncle Peter began to show dissatisfaction. The quality of food decreased, and visitors complained. During this period, the young widow first seriously thought about using Margaret's secret recipe. But brewing the special ale required ingredients, time, and suitable conditions. She had none of this. Moreover, in someone else's tavern, such experiments could cause suspicion and conflict. But how to find a way out of this vicious circle? The work barely provided survival, but gave no opportunity to accumulate funds for independence. The children were growing and demanding more and more attention and resources. Her health was undermined by constant tension. It seemed life had turned into an endless struggle for every day. Salvation came from an unexpected sight. In the spring, a grain trader named Ethan began to visit the tavern regularly. A middle-aged widower, he noticed the hard-working woman with 2 children and felt sympathy for her. At first, he simply left more generous tips, then began to inquire about her circumstances. Ethan offered an unusual deal. He was ready to hire her as a housekeeper in his house, provide housing and food for her and the children. In return, she had to manage his household, cook food, and maintain order. The salary was modest but regular. The main thing was that it was an opportunity to leave the stuffy tavern kitchen and provide the children with a more stable life. The decision was not easy. On one hand, Ethan's offer meant relative security and the opportunity to better care for the children. On the other hand, it again meant life in service, dependence on someone else's will. Dreams of her own business were postponed indefinitely. In the end, practical considerations won. The children needed stability more than the mother needed independence. Ethan turned out to be a decent man who did not demand anything beyond the agreed duties. His house was small but cozy, with a garden where the children could play in the fresh air. The move took place at the end of spring. Saying goodbye to Uncle Peter, the young woman thanked him for the opportunity to survive in the most difficult months. The old man wished her luck and unexpectedly added that the doors of his tavern would always be open to her. These words warmed her soul and gave hope that someday she would be able to return to the tavern business, already as an owner, not as a servant. 2 years in Ethan's house flew by unnoticed, like a dream after a hard day. Life in service to a decent master turned out to be completely different from the previous ordeal. The children grew up healthy and well-fed. They had time for games and childish amusements. The son already helped in the garden, collecting vegetables and fruits, and the daughter was learning to walk and say her first words. Ethan was not only fair, but also an attentive employer. He saw how skillfully the young woman managed the household, how economically she spent the money allocated for food, and how she maintained order in the house. Gradually, he began to trust her with more and more decisions, from choosing products at the market to planning repairs. During these months, she learned a lot about the grain trade. Ethan did not hide the features of his business, telling how prices changed depending on the harvest, which varieties of wheat were valued more, and how to build relationships with millers and bakers. This knowledge turned out to be unexpectedly useful for understanding the urban economy. But how she dreamed of her own business. Every free minute she spent thinking through plans for a future tavern, mentally calculating the costs of renting premises, purchasing equipment, and initial stock of products. Margaret's secret recipe was still stored in her memory, waiting for its hour. Try to imagine what willpower it took to save a few copper coins every day from an already modest salary. She denied herself new clothes, bought the simplest food, and darned stockings until they completely fell apart.
Every saved penny was put aside in a small bag hidden in the farthest corner of the room. By the end of the second year of service with Ethan, she had accumulated a sum that would seem ridiculous to a rich man, but for her, it meant the first step toward independence. It would be enough for several months of modest life, or for the initial deposit for renting a small premises. The main question remained: where and how to start her own business? The answer came unexpectedly. In the town, a small tavern in a not very prestigious but lively district was put up for sale. The previous owner had gone bankrupt due to a passion for gambling. Creditors demanded a quick sale of the property. The price was significantly below real value, but still exceeded her possibilities several times. Ethan, upon learning of her plans, treated them with understanding. Moreover, he offered to become a guarantor when obtaining a loan from a moneylender. The terms were tough: high interest, short repayment period, but there was no other way to get the required amount. The risk was enormous. In case of failure, she would lose not only the accumulated money, but also fall into a debt pit. The decision was made with great difficulty. At night, she lay awake, weighing all the arguments for and against. On one hand, she had experience working in a tavern, knowledge of the intricacies of the business, and the secret recipe that could attract special clients. On the other hand, she was a lonely woman with 2 small children, without influential patrons or significant capital. In the end, the decisive argument was the thought of the children. The son was growing into a smart boy. The daughter also showed signs of a sharp mind. In service, they could only count on a modest future. Her own business, even risky, gave a chance for a better life. The purchase took place in the spring of her 25th year. The tavern was in a deplorable state: a leaking roof, broken tables and benches, dirt and desolation everywhere. But the main walls were strong, and the basement was quite suitable for storing supplies and brewing beer. Most importantly, the location was successful, near craft workshops and a small market. The first weeks turned into continuous work to bring the premises in order. She washed, scrubbed, and repaired everything that could be fixed with her own hands. Ethan sometimes stopped by after work and helped with more complex repairs. The children also participated in the common cause. The son handed tools, the daughter collected garbage. Especially difficult was organizing the kitchen. The old hearth required complete rebuilding. Dishes were broken or stolen. There was a lack of the most necessary utensils. Every purchase was carefully considered. There was very little money left, and the debt to the moneylender required regular payments. But how exciting was the moment of the first brewing of beer according to Margaret's secret recipe. In the tavern basement stood new barrels. The air was filled with the familiar smell of fermentation. She strictly observed all the subtleties of the process, adding herbs in a precisely defined sequence. The result exceeded expectations. The ale turned out aromatic, with an unusual taste that was remembered from the first sip. The opening took place at the beginning of summer. The first visitors were neighbor craftsmen, attracted by the smell of fried meat and fresh bread. They treated the new owner with some distrust. Too young, and a woman at that. But the quality of food, and especially the beer, quickly dispelled doubts. It sounds surprising, doesn't it? But already after a month of work, the tavern began to bring a small profit. Of course, most of the income had to be given to the moneylender, but what remained was enough for a modest life and gradual improvement of the establishment. The children helped as best they could. The son cleared tables, the daughter entertained visitors with her childish spontaneity. However, not everything went smoothly. Local guild masters treated the success of the young owner with suspicion. They were used to taverns belonging either to men or to widows who had inherited the business from their husbands. An independent woman starting from scratch seemed suspicious to them. Particular discontent was caused by her special ale. Some competitors hinted at the use of prohibited additives or even witchcraft. These rumors could seriously harm the reputation, so she had to be very careful in communicating with potential ill wishers. But the most serious test was the conflict with the owner of the neighboring tavern, Red Rooster. This man, accustomed to a monopoly in the district, could not come to terms with the appearance of a competitor. He began to spread rumors about poor food quality, persuaded suppliers to raise prices, and even tried to lure away the best customers. By the end of the first year of independent management, it became clear that to survive in this struggle, more than culinary skills and hard work were needed. Political connections, the ability to negotiate with influential people, and the ability to defend one's interests in conditions of fierce competition were required, and she was ready to learn this art. The second year of running her own business began with an important decision: to hire an assistant.
The tavern's finances allowed this step, and the volume of work already exceeded the strength of one person. The choice fell on a young guy named Lucas, the son of a bankrupt butcher. Strong and honest, he quickly mastered the duties of carrying barrels from the basement, helping in the kitchen, and maintaining order in the hall. The presence of Lucas allowed expanding the tavern's working hours and improving service. Now it was possible to accept more visitors, especially in the evening when craftsmen finished work and went to dinner. The son had also grown up and became a real helper. He already skillfully carried food, knew the prices of all dishes, and could explain to visitors the features of the local beer. The conflict with the owner of the Red Rooster intensified with the arrival of spring. This man, named William, could not come to terms with the fact that his establishment was losing customers.
He began offering food at reduced prices, trying to squeeze the competitor out of the market. But this strategy worked only with those who were interested exclusively in cheapness. Try to imagine what feelings the young owner experienced while watching this dishonest competition. On one hand, she understood that in trade, all means are good. On the other hand, such methods could ruin her business and leave the children without shelter and food. She needed to find a way to counter this pressure. The solution came after a conversation with one of the regular customers, a fabric trader named Armand. This middle-aged man with perceptive eyes and a well-groomed beard often stopped by the tavern after business meetings. He noticed her anxiety and delicately inquired about the reasons. Armand turned out to be not just a successful trader, but also an expert in town politics. He explained that conflicts between tavern owners were common, but they should be resolved not by lowering prices, but by improving the quality of services. The main thing was to find one's niche, those clients who were willing to pay for a special approach. It was then that she first dared to openly offer visitors her special ale. Until then, Margaret's secret recipe had been used only for small portions, served to particularly trusted clients. Now, this drink became the hallmark of the establishment, what distinguished her tavern from all others in the area. The result exceeded all expectations. The special ale really found its admirers among wealthier visitors. Traders, guild masters, and even some representatives of minor gentry began to regularly order this drink. They were willing to pay twice as much as for ordinary beer, but in return, they received a product of unique quality. But how difficult it was to keep the recipe secret under conditions of open production. Competitors tried to bribe Lucas to find out the secret of preparation. Suppliers of herbs received orders from other taverns for the same ingredients. She had to show ingenuity, buy some components in different places, and brew the ale only in the absence of outsiders. Relations with Armand gradually grew from business to closer ones. This man showed sincere interest not only in the special beer, but also in the tavern owner herself. He often stayed after closing, helped with advice in difficult situations, and told about the subtleties of the fabric trade. Armand was an educated man who could read and write and understood accounting. He offered to help with keeping records of income and expenses, which turned out to be very timely. Until then, all accounting had been done in her head or on random scraps of paper. Now, neat records appeared that allowed precise planning of business development. The children took well to Armand.
The son listened with interest to his stories about distant lands from where the best fabrics were brought. The daughter, who was already 4 years old, often sat on his lap when he showed samples of cloth of different colors and textures. It seemed their small family could find new completeness. However, over time, less attractive traits of the trader's character became noticeable. Armand showed a tendency towards stinginess in small things and could bargain for a long time over a few copper coins. He often hinted that he helped the tavern disinterestedly and expected special privileges for it. The breakup occurred in the fall when Armand directly demanded a share in the tavern's profits as payment for his advice and help. He referred to the fact that it was his ideas that helped increase income, and therefore he had the right to part of the success. Such impudence outraged the owner to the depths of her soul. It sounds surprising, doesn't it? But this unpleasant experience taught her an important lesson about human nature. Even the most charming and useful people can turn out to be mercenary if they see an opportunity to benefit. Since then, all business relations began to be built on a more formal basis, with a clear definition of mutual obligations. Meanwhile, the tavern's affairs continued to improve. By the end of the year, she managed not only to pay off the most urgent debts, but also to accumulate a small sum for development. The neighboring building, where a bankrupt shoemaker's workshop had once been located, was put up for sale. Purchasing this premises would allow significant expansion of the tavern. Negotiations about the purchase were conducted through an intermediary, the same lawyer who had once helped in disputes with her late husband's relatives. The price was acceptable, but required new loans. This time, the creditor was not a moneylender, but the Merchants Guild, which provided loans to its members on more favorable terms. Joining the guild became an important milestone in the life of the young businesswoman. Now she received not only access to preferential loans, but also protection from an influential organization and the opportunity to participate in decisions concerning town trade. Membership fees were significant, but the benefits outweighed the costs. The expansion of the tavern took the entire winter. In the new premises, they placed an additional hall for wealthier clients, a separate kitchen for preparing special dishes, and rooms for overnight stays for visiting traders. This required hiring 2 more assistants, but the increase in income more than covered the additional expenses. By the spring of her 28th year, the tavern had become one of the most prosperous establishments in the district. Regular customers recommended it to their friends and business partners. The special ale became so popular that it was ordered even for private celebrations in wealthy homes. Spring of the 29th year brought an unusual guest to the tavern. Late in the evening, when most clients had already gone home, a man in a worn monastic robe knocked on the door. Under the hood hid the thin face of a middle-aged man with intelligent but restless eyes. He asked for lodging and simple food, paying with a silver coin that clearly exceeded the cost of modest services. The monk introduced himself as Brother Bernard and explained that he was heading to a distant monastery on the affairs of his order. But something in his manner of behavior, in the way he looked around and flinched at every unexpected sound, spoke of something else. The experienced eye of the tavern owner, accustomed to understanding people, immediately noticed signs of fear. Try to imagine the position of the woman who had to make a decision in a matter of minutes. Providing lodging to a suspicious stranger meant risk for herself and the children. But refusing a man in monastic clothing was tantamount to sin. Besides, the silver coin was worth several days of ordinary earnings. In the end, mercy and practical considerations prevailed over caution. The monk was settled in a small room on the 2nd floor and served simple food and ale. He ate silently and thanked sparingly. But when the owner casually mentioned the difficulties of keeping accounts, he unexpectedly offered help. It turned out that Brother Bernard possessed the art of writing and counting better than many town lawyers. His handwriting was elegant, his knowledge of arithmetic deep, and his ability to draw up documents astonishing. In one night, he put in order the confused accounting of the tavern that had accumulated over months. The next morning, the monk was getting ready to leave, but the owner offered him to stay a few more days to finish work with the documents. The pay was generous, the conditions comfortable, and most importantly, no one asked unnecessary questions about his past. Bernard agreed, and these few days stretched into weeks. Gradually, from conversations, the true circumstances of the strange monk's appearance in the tavern became clear. He had indeed served in a monastery, but not as a simple brother, but as the keeper of the library and chief copyist of manuscripts. Accusations of heresy brought against him by church authorities forced him to flee the monastery in search of shelter. But how dangerous it was to shelter a fugitive monk accused of heresy. The church did not forgive such crimes either to the guilty or to those who helped them. If the connection with Bernard were revealed, the tavern would be closed, property confiscated, and the owner herself could be brought to trial. The children would be left orphans, and years of labor would go to waste. Nevertheless, the risk seemed justified because Bernard brought enormous benefit. He not only kept impeccable records, but also gave valuable advice on business development. His knowledge of trade routes, obtained from communicating with pilgrims and merchants in the monastery, helped choose the best suppliers and find new clients. Especially interesting was the information about the trade in spices and rare herbs. Bernard knew which monasteries grew medicinal plants, where ingredients for the special ale could be purchased at lower prices, and how to organize regular supplies without intermediaries. This knowledge was worth more than gold. It sounds surprising, doesn't it? But it was thanks to the advice of the fugitive monk that the tavern began to specialize in serving visiting traders who needed not only food and lodging, but also reliable information about the town's trading opportunities. Bernard prepared detailed reports for them about prices, demand for various goods, and the reliability of local partners. For these services, merchants were willing to pay an additional fee that significantly exceeded the cost of ordinary hotel service. The tavern gradually turned from a simple place of rest into an information center for business people. Such a reputation attracted an increasingly wealthy and influential clientele. The children quickly got used to the presence of the educated monk. The son, who was already 10 years old, eagerly listened to Bernard's stories about distant lands, life in the monastery, and the secrets of ancient manuscripts. The daughter learned her first letters from him, a rare privilege for a girl from a merchant family. However, the constant presence of the fugitive in the tavern could not go unnoticed. Lucas, despite his loyalty, sometimes let things slip in conversations with other servants. Visitors asked questions about the mysterious lodger who never left the building during the day. Rumors began to spread around the town. The culmination came when a representative of the episcopal office entered the tavern with questions about possible harboring of a fugitive cleric. The owner maintained complete calm, showed all documents concerning the lodgers, and presented Bernard as a distant relative helping with household management. The inspector found no obvious violations, but suspicions remained. After this incident, it became clear that further stay of the monk in the tavern was impossible. It was necessary to find him a safer shelter or help him leave the town. Bernard understood the situation and was ready to leave, but first he wanted to thank her for hospitality and protection. His gift was a detailed map of trade routes in the northern states, with indications of all important cities, fairs, monasteries, and forts. This information was the result of many years of observations and notes, a real treasure for any trader. In addition, he left letters of recommendation to the abbots of several monasteries that might be useful in the future. Bernard's departure was organized with maximum caution. He was hoped to reach a neighboring town where among the merchants there were people ready to give work to an educated copyist. The secret of his true position remained between them, but the connection was not completely severed. Several months later came news that the accusations against the monk had been dropped thanks to the intervention of influential patrons. He received a position as copyist at the court of one of the barons and finally found safety. In gratitude, he sent rare books on conducting trade and a herbal with descriptions of medicinal plants. The story with Bernard taught the tavern owner an important lesson. Sometimes the most risky decisions bring the greatest benefit. But the main thing is that such risks must be taken consciously, carefully weighing possible consequences. Mercy and calculation can go hand in hand if wisdom is shown in their combination. By the end of the year, when the dangers associated with harboring the fugitive monk were in the past, the tavern reached new heights of prosperity. Information services became a constant source of income. The special ale won a reputation as the best in town, and the owner herself earned respect as a wise and reliable business partner. The path from a poor widow to a successful businesswoman was more than half completed. Her 31st year of life met the tavern owner in all the splendor of her mastery. The establishment worked like a well-oiled mechanism. Each of the 4 assistants knew their duties. Regular customers filled the halls from morning to evening, and the special ale became so famous that traders came for it from neighboring towns. But true satisfaction came not only from financial well-being, but also from the opportunity to pass on the accumulated experience to the next generation. The son, who had turned 12, had become a real helper to his mother. Tall for his age, with attentive eyes and quick hands, he easily handled barrels, knew the tastes of regular visitors, and could conduct simple negotiations with suppliers. Especially well he succeeded in communicating with visiting merchants. The boy had an amazing ability to win people over. The daughter also did not lag behind in mastering the family craft. At 9 years old, she could already read and write better than many adult townspeople, thanks to the lessons once given by Brother Bernard. The girl helped keep records of products, made lists of necessary purchases, and even tried to create new recipes, experimenting with spices. The Merchants' Guild of the town offered the tavern owner participation in an important project, organizing a large fair that was supposed to attract traders from all surrounding lands. Her establishment was planned to become one of the centers of hospitality for the wealthiest participants of the celebration. This meant not only prestige, but also significant income. Preparation for the fair required serious investments. New furniture had to be ordered from the best masters of the town, dishes updated, wine cellars expanded, and additional cooks and servants hired. Special attention was paid to stocks of that very special ale. Demand for it during the fair promised to exceed all expectations. But how difficult it was to coordinate all these preparations. Masters delayed orders, suppliers raised prices, competitors tried to lure away the best workers. Every day brought new challenges requiring quick and precise decisions. The experience accumulated over the years of running the business was now subjected to a serious test. Especially difficult were negotiations with town authorities. Holding the fair required many permits, payment of special taxes, and compliance with strict trade rules. Representatives of the magistrate carefully studied every detail of the planned events, not missing the opportunity to receive additional bribes for their services. It sounds surprising, doesn't it? But it was during this period that the tavern owner first felt like a truly influential member of the town community. Her opinion was taken into account when making decisions. Other entrepreneurs turned to her experience. Her support could tip the scales in favor of one or another candidate for the town council. The fair took place in the fall and exceeded all expectations. Traders from distant lands came to the town, bringing goods that local residents had not seen for years. Silks from the east, furs from the north, wines from the south,
products of skilled craftsmen. All this created an atmosphere of holiday and abundance. The tavern worked day and night, receiving waves of guests. The special ale was in such demand that sales to each customer had to be limited so that there would be enough for all who wanted it. Information services were also in demand. Visiting merchants willingly paid for information about local trading opportunities and reliable partners. By the end of the fair, income exceeded the boldest calculations, but the main result was not gold, but reputation. The tavern gained fame far beyond the town. Business connections were established with merchants from remote areas. Offers of permanent cooperation appeared. However, success also generated new problems. Envious competitors intensified attempts to harm the prospering establishment.
The owner of the Red Rooster filed a complaint with the guild, accusing his rival of unfair competition and using prohibited methods to attract customers. Formally, the accusations were groundless, but the proceedings took time and nerves. A more serious threat was the attention of church authorities to the unusual composition of the special ale. Some herbs included in Margaret's secret recipe could be interpreted as related to witchcraft or pagan rituals. A church alchemist had to be invited for official examination of all ingredients. Try to imagine the tension of those days when the future of the entire business hung by a thread. One wrong answer, one careless word, could destroy years of labor. But the experience accumulated in communicating with the most different people helped find the right words and convince the inspectors of the harmlessness of the recipe. Winter brought relative calm and the opportunity to sum up the results. The tavern had reached a level of prosperity that 10 years ago could only be dreamed of. Debts to moneylenders and the guild were fully repaid. Significant capital accumulated for further development, and strong business connections established. But the most important achievement was that the children received excellent preparation for continuing the family business. The son could already independently manage the tavern in his mother's absence. The daughter demonstrated amazing abilities in the field of accounting and planning. The dynasty was secured. In the spring of her 32nd year, the tavern owner made a decision about a new expansion. This time, it was not just about additional premises, but about creating an entire complex of services for wealthy clients. Separate chambers for important guests, a stable for horses, and warehouses for goods of visiting merchants were planned. This project required investments comparable to the original purchase of the tavern, but now financial possibilities allowed such investments. In addition, experience and reputation guaranteed the success of the enterprise. The town was growing and getting richer, trade was developing, and demand for quality services was constantly increasing. By summer, construction was completed and the renovated tavern opened in all its splendor. It became not just a place where one could eat and spend the night, but a real center of business life in the district. Deals were concluded here, news was discussed, and trade expeditions were planned. At 32 years old, the age of the prime of strength and wisdom, the tavern owner had reached a position in society that allowed her to influence town politics, support young entrepreneurs, and participate in charitable projects. The path from the daughter of a ruined baker to one of the most respected businesswomen in town had been traveled with honor. Joyful news of her daughter's upcoming wedding came at the most successful time in the family's life. The girl had turned 16. She had become a real beauty with lively eyes and a quick mind inherited from her mother. Her chosen one was the son of a prosperous spice trader, a young man who was educated, well-mannered, and with good prospects in the trading business. The acquaintance happened in the most natural way. The young man had come to the tavern several times on his father's errand to discuss supplies of rare spices. The girl helped conduct negotiations, demonstrating an amazing understanding of the subtleties of trade. The young people liked each other. Parents on both sides approved the union, and things quickly moved toward the wedding. The bride's dowry included not only traditional things, bed linen, dishes, clothes, but also a share in the family business.
The tavern owner decided to transfer to her daughter the right to a third of future profits, which provided the young family with a solid foundation for independent life. Such generosity earned approval in merchant circles. But how difficult it was to let her beloved daughter go into independent life. The girl had been from childhood not just a helper, but a trusted person with whom any business issues could be discussed. Her sharp mind and intuitive understanding of people often helped make the right decisions in difficult situations. The wedding took place in the fall and became a real event for the entire trading district of the town. Significant funds were invested in the celebration. It was not only an expression of parental love, but also a demonstration of the family's financial power.
Guests ate the best dishes, drank the special ale, and celebrated until morning. Try to imagine the feeling of a mother watching her dancing daughter in a rich wedding dress, pride in the achieved successes mixed with the sadness of parting. The little girl who once played among sacks of flour in the tavern kitchen was turning into a respected married woman from a merchant family. The son-in-law turned out to be not only a pleasant young man, but also a valuable business partner. Thanks to his connections, the tavern gained access to rare spices at favorable prices, which allowed diversifying the menu and attracting new clients. The son, meanwhile, turned into a real man. At 15, he looked older than his age, possessed developed muscles from constant work with heavy barrels and sacks. Most importantly, he showed remarkable abilities in managing people and organizing work. The young man took upon himself all responsibility for the economic side of the business, purchasing products, control over cooks and servants, maintaining order in the premises. This allowed his mother to focus on strategic planning and establishing new business connections. It sounds surprising, doesn't it? But it was during this period that the tavern owner first seriously thought about political activity. Her experience in trade, knowledge of town problems, and authority among the merchants, all this gave the opportunity to influence the adoption of important decisions in the magistrate. Participation in the work of the Merchants' Guild became increasingly active. She was elected to the Council of Elders, where issues of trade policy, taxation, and organization of fairs were considered. The voice of the experienced businesswoman carried significant weight in discussing controversial issues. However, growing influence also generated new problems. Some competitors began to spread rumors that the success of the tavern was based not on honest labor, but on dark connections with influential patrons. These gossip could seriously damage the reputation, so she had to be especially careful in her affairs. The church also showed increased attention to the activities of the prospering tavern. Priests reminded of the need for more generous donations corresponding to the increased well-being. Winter brought an unexpected challenge, an epidemic of fever that began to spread through the town. Authorities ordered the closure of all places of mass gathering of people, including taverns. This decision threatened serious financial losses, but disobedience was impossible. The period of forced downtime was used for major repairs of the premises and planning further development. The son proposed several interesting ideas for modernizing the kitchen and improving the product storage system. His technical solutions turned out to be so successful that owners of other establishments became interested in them. When the epidemic subsided and authorities allowed work to resume, the tavern opened in an updated form. Improved equipment allowed raising the quality of service and expanding the range of dishes. Clients appreciated the innovation, and the flow of visitors quickly recovered. To the end of her 33rd year, the family business had reached new heights. But in the spring of the next year, as the town was recovering, a far more devastating plague, the true morbus, struck. What began as scattered cases quickly turned into a full-blown catastrophe. Despite all precautions, the disease entered their home. The son, ever the steadfast protector, fell ill first while helping deliver food to the poor. Then the daughter and her young family. In the final cruel twist, the woman who had built an empire through resilience, wisdom, and mercy watched helplessly as the very family she had sacrificed everything to protect was taken from her. The special ale that had brought fortune could not save them. The empire she built survived, passed to distant relatives and apprentices, but the heart of the dynasty, her children and grandchildren, was gone. She lived on, a respected but broken figure, her greatest achievement now a haunting reminder of how even the strongest American dream could shatter in the face of uncontrollable fate.